Right.
Ladies and gentlemen, our special guest this week, we've got a theme going here with amazing bass players. And this guy is a founding member of the Dixie Dregs, a legendary musician, bass player and composer. And we're going to hang out with him tonight. This is our good friend, Andy West.
I love that you have drums live.
Right?
That's really cool.
Well, we usually try and jam in the beginning, but there's the delay, in which makes it even more
it's
like.
Impossible. You could just what you could do, Travis, is you could use a reverse guitar effect. Therefore, timing wouldn't matter.
Oh wow! Now you're getting somewhere. This sounds like something Henry Kaiser would do.
Sounds like something.
I've been working with Henry, so that's the issue.
Our jams are a statement about the state of online jams. Everybody says, no, you should just do it. It'll be good enough. And our point is sort of like, it's not good enough. It's worth a laugh, but that's about it.
Yeah, it's crazy.
So I'm just going to say, in my defense, Andy, we sound checked for 10 minutes and nobody told me I sounded like shit.
Well, we could understand what you were saying, but when what was funny, when, of course, you couldn't hear me, but when you were rocking back in your chair, I was thinking, God, the squeak from the chair is perfectly clear.
Yeah, right. Yep.
Usually I have a non-squeaking chair too. That's part of the issue. That's part of the sound check is I would change chairs. That's a real thing. So Andy, first of all, let me just say that of all the legendary musicians that I've been privileged to become friends with, you are one of the friendliest. And I met you, I don't know, it feels like maybe about 8 or 10 years ago at one of those bass jams at the NAMM show.
Right.
And I saw you standing there and I walked up and sheepishly said, are you Andy West? And you said, yeah, I am. And then we hung out and talked for 30 or 40 minutes. And it was like talking to an old friend. So that's carried on. And I have many, many stories about, what's great about you. Some of them I told on here, but I'm going to tell one really quick and then we'll get into more of an Andy West back and forth discussion. The Andy West show, yes. But we were doing a clinic, and I don't know if everyone's heard this story. Some of you probably have not, but we were doing a clinic, and you showed up to that clinic, which right there to us was like, holy crap, Andy West showed up to our clinic. And then there was a guy in the front row that was either tweaking on something or it had many, many adult beverages, but there was something going on with this guy.
Right.
And he was just progressively inappropriate as the clinic went on. And I'm eyeing everybody in the store that works at the store. I'm looking at the manager. I'm looking at guys that are, work on the floor. They're all gathered around watching this clinic. And nobody's acting. Nobody's doing a thing about this guy. And to the point where, if you remember the Three Amigos, when they were trying to get their attention from the rooftop, and he's like acting like a bird, look up here, look up here. It was like that kind of thing where I'm just looking at everybody like, anyone want to take care of this guy? Anyone want to at least conversate with him and maybe lead him somewhere? And so the only person that eventually got up was you to take care of business. And so after that, we're lifelong friends now because you were the one guy in the place that had any kind of guts to get up and say, okay, this is becoming an issue. Somebody needs to help these fellow musicians out and do something about this. So thank you. We are forever in your debt, and you're a stand-up man.
That's funny, man. I'd forgotten all about that, but I definitely remember that guy. It's really crazy. But well, anyways, I'm thrilled to be here with you guys. You're definitely cool and fun.
Oh, well, appreciate it.
And what's funny? I was listening to your music again. I mean, I think I have 3 of your albums, and probably the last 3. But sadly, because of the world that we live in, I actually don't know the names of any of your songs. But I know a lot of your music. I mean, I hear it, So I can't really talk about it. But
it's okay. We don't know the names either.
Yeah, well, you have a great body of work, and I really appreciate that. And Dale, I thought it was funny you said I couldn't play a set right now. I know that feeling. It's like, right? Oh yeah, because when you actually are playing a set, you've actually worked on it a lot. You know, you can tell.
Yeah,
it's really cool. So I don't know where you guys want to begin with this, but there are some interesting things. Like we could actually pick up, because we just logged on right before this to talk for a little bit, and you know, I mean, Jen is a really great bass player, but what I'm really interested in is her speaker stands that she made. So I don't know. Did you say you had them there, Jen?
I do. I told Andy, I go, I'll show it on the show because that'll be my show and tell.
Yay.
Okay.
So yes, at sound check right here before the thing, Andy had asked me about routing, and I had recently started using a router and doing some woodworking and stuff. So I have one right here. It's kind of big. What was this other piece that's just a hunk of tree that I ended up sanding and kind of turning into just a thing.
Awesome.
It's a thing with a flat surface and a tree.
Yep.
So you set it, you put, you know, stuff on it. Like, there's my pen.
That's awesome.
Piece.
Well, how did you get that surface? That's not a perfectly flat surface, is it?
No, this is just the cut, but I sanded it all down really smooth and then buffed it out with some wood polishing compound and things like that. But yeah, I sanded on it for quite a while and took the edges all down so they're nice and soft. And the backside I wanted to leave really rough, like the original. This is a bit of oak tree. So yeah, I just found this and made it into.
It looks really neat on the camera, on the fuzzy camera.
Okay, good.
Assuming Andy's had better things to do than watch these shows for the last 17 weeks, I'm going to say there's been a running joke with us cutting trees down because Jen has a bunch of trees in the yard that we've been helping her clear throughout. And so that's
Andy, all the stringed instruments and players in my band, Andy, are playing with chainsaws constantly. And Jen has rotary saws. She has a garage and she likes to go, look at this cool. And I'm real supportive because I know how much gratification she gets out of this kind of woodworking. But I can't condone it. It's all kinds of blades. Anyway.
This is my very first routing project. You can see this is just a 4x4 and some MDF with some routing and
and you do that edge.
A speaker stand. It goes like this. Here's the bottom.
But you did that crazy complicated edge, right?
Yeah.
So you know, what's really weird about that is that routing, of course, I don't know if any of you guys are bilingual or multilingual, but I'm not. But if I was, I would imagine that there are words that you have to, like the same word in a different language means something completely different. Mm-hmm. So router is heavily overloaded for me.
Yes.
And routing, you know, it's all about, you know, these boxes, you know, the electronic boxes.
Yeah, right.
So
sure. For me too, actually, yes. When I did some routing today, people kind of automatically assume I was IT girl.
Or the tour manager, which you've been routing. Jen's the one who like figures out the routes we take between stops.
Really?
So yeah, there's a whole third overload of meanings for that word.
Are you kidding me? Jen? You tell these guys how to get from A to B?
I think, or she.
It's kind of
or do you actually do it? Do you drive it? I mean, I don't know. I'm just making an assumption here.
Well, typically with TLB, Travis does the driving and we sort of coordinate the routing together and I handle all the hotel bookings and things like that. On the Aristocrats tour, I was driving a significant amount of that tour, which, that was
that must have been different. You know,
that's a good word for it.
Well, you know, on this last Dregs tour that we did, it was, you know, Steve and I cannot sleep. I mean, Travis, you said people like stories. We're just going to interject weird little stories here and there.
Yep.
But there's a picture I have somewhere of us. Our first sort of band vehicle was this thing we bought from Steve's dad. It was an International Harvester truck, which was a precursor to all the SUVs, right? So it was like a giant station wagon. And Steve and I would be in the front seat after the gig, driving home. He would always drive because it's just more comfortable for him if he drives. Let's just put it that way. I can drive on occasion with him. I feel honored to be an approved driver in his car, but
Right.
at the same time, if he's awake, he's going to do it.
Similar in this group here.
Driving along, and we would look in the back, and there'd be the three guys in the back, like the Three Stooges, snoring.
Right.
In different intervals and at different times, and we just listen to this and look at those guys and just go, "Oh my God."
Would this be along the lines of what we're talking about?
Yeah, well, except it was is that a 4-door model? That's a 2-door.
That's a
It was like
2-door.
4-door model
Wow.
of that. Yeah.
Wow.
Gotcha.
That's
Impressive.
And we had a trailer, and honestly, I learned how to back up a trailer, in my early 20s there with that, and it's never left me. I mean, I know how to drive a trailer, no
Right.
problem.
Yep.
Yeah. That's-
It wasn't. There's all kinds of fun stuff coming up when I went looking for International Harvester, but I'm pretty sure it's not this one, right?
No, that would be awesome, though, wouldn't it?
yeah.
That would be a vehicle.
Yeah.
So one of the things I like to pick great musicians' brains on, and I know that you have not been as heavy in the heat of it lately, but when you are, and I'm always kind of asking because Dale and I get into these conversations, we're usually trying to gauge how good or bad we are. But when you memorize some of that Dregs material or whatever really complex material that you guys are playing, how well does that stuff stay under your fingers over time when you're not playing it? Is it something, obviously you have to revisit it, but does it come back or is it gone? Do you have to start from scratch?
Yeah, well, it depends on the recent, the 2 or 3 years ago when we did the tour. There were sections that I hadn't played in 20 years that I could just play. But there were a lot of things which were like, okay, what was that?
Mhm.
Yeah.
And then there were a lot of kind of thoughts that followed that, which were, what were we thinking, when we were doing this stuff, because it was kind of crazy. But just like anybody, I mean, it's the same kind of thing. I mean, everyone has a different mind for this type of stuff. But, some people have really great memories. Sometimes, when you practice things as much as you do or as much as I have done, it's burned in. You know what I mean? Some of it is definitely burned in there.
Right.
And, the right circumstance will pull it out. One of my favorite Dregs tune is I'm Freaking Out, but we could never play that now. It's just too athletic. But every now and again, I'll just play the line just because it's a really hard line to pick and play. And what's funny about it is sometimes I'll just sit down and I'll remember the line all the way through, the main theme line, and other times I'll get like about a bar and a half in and my hand just won't go any further. And I'll be like, how's that next part go?
Yeah.
So, there's nothing special about me and that. It's really just, if you memorize something and you do it over and over and over and over and over, it will be in there somewhere.
Yeah.
Right. Do you feel like it comes quickly to you, or is it a real effort? Obviously we can't compare to how other people's brains work, but
Yeah, it depends on the song. I can't explain why something would have stuck more than another,
Yeah.
right.
Do you find that you kind of have associations with certain things? And so, I don't know, like there's certain parts of songs that every time I play it, it reminds me of either a person or I don't know, something strange like that. And so some of those things stick better.
Yeah, there may be things like that. A lot of times it's just a feeling, right? I mean, it's like you feel a certain way when you play a kind of a part, in Divided We Stand, there's this part with these chords that every time I play them, I feel really great.
Right.
I mean, I just love playing these chords on the bass. It's like, it's such a cool part.
Yeah.
That's great.
And I just don't think about it, but I kind of look for that in the song. I'll be playing this song. Okay, that part's coming up. I really like that part. And it's not a showy thing or anything. It's just, I just love that part of the music.
Yeah.
Right.
So it's a feeling, right?
Yeah.
I mean, you must have stuff like that, right? Come on.
Sure. Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. Hey Jen,
to-
while I ask Andy this next question, check your audio and make sure that you have the correct microphone selected.
And while you're doing that, I'll say somebody asked what's in the cup, Dale, and here you go.
That's nice.
Eric Davis wants to know, Andy, do you have any favorite T. Lavitz story? T's kind of known for being a funny guy and kind of a goofball. He had a great sense of humor.
And Eric's a great keyboard player and is a huge T fan.
Yeah. Well, T, of course, was a very dear friend of mine. And I do have a T story.
Nice.
Okay,
we like it already.
Yeah, this is funny. All right. So what happened was Steve and I had this band in high school. And at some point I will tell the story of meeting Steve and how this kind of whole thing happened from that point. But we had this band in high school. Then he went to college at the University of Miami. I went to Atlanta. He came back to Augusta. I came back to Augusta. We started this band together, had, people in the band. And two of the guys that were in our band before we had a record deal or before I ever met Rod and Alan were Mark Parrish and Steve Davidowski. So they were keyboard players in the Dregs from our high school days, really, and our early college days. We went down to, so Steve Davidowski, when we came back to Augusta from college, Steve Davidowski became our keyboard player in the Dregs. We had people in Miami that had played with us in college and this kind of stuff. But Davidowski was our guy, and he was on our first album. And then he left the band, which is a whole other story. And we had Mark Parrish, who was also in the band from high school, but he came back into the band for the What If album and Night of the Living Dregs album. Mark left the band. By the way, we had a lot of fun, but it was also really intense. Sure. I mean, the level of energy that it took to do this stuff was extreme. And just to be in the band, I mean, we really bootstrapped it. I mean, in the old school kind of way, starting with the International Harvester and continuing on, I mean, there's a million stories of all the bars we played in the South and everything else, right? So this is a long way of saying how T got in the band. Because Mark left, and we actually fired Mark, which, was unfortunate. But we didn't fire him until Rod had said, hey, I know this guy in Miami, and we're going to be playing there. Maybe we should go listen to him play and see what it's all about, because we're having issues with Mark. He wasn't really reliable and this kind of stuff. Great player, really interesting guy, but just his reliability was a problem for us. So we met T in Florida and said, hey, you want to come be in our band? And T is in college. We're kind of semi-famous in Miami from being from the University of Miami. T has all these dreams about, a famous rock band is trying to get me to join them. Great, I'll join the band. And so we said, all right, so here's the deal. We're working our asses off, but we can only pay you $250 a week. And so in Florida, a good musician could make that very easily. I mean, it was like, it wasn't, even then, making $300 or $400 a week wasn't a big deal. I mean, probably double or triple those numbers now, for whatever it was. But I'm talking about not musicians like us who play original music that no one wants to pay for. I'm talking about playing in like Mar-a-Lago, or something.
Sure, right. Yeah.
The Fountain Blue. So anyhow, T, the first reaction that T had when we told him $250 a week was like, oh my, what? You're kidding, right? Because he immediately had this idea that he was going to make a ton of money. Mm-hmm. So we explained how it worked, and well, look, we bought this truck. We have to pay the roadies. Everyone has to make money, even when we're not playing. Mm-hmm. So this is not a per gig thing. This is like you get $250 a week. And we weren't making any more than that either. I mean, we gave him the same salary we had.
Mm-hmm.
Said, this is what it is. This is what we make. And so he kind of like got over the shock and got in the band. And then after he was in the band, we said, all right, so it was still a little bit of a weird dynamic because we had 2 albums out and we had invested in a band house and a truck. And, you know, we had a business, right? We had a business. So we said, all right, T, we want to make you a full-time member, you know? and he really thought that meant making more money.
Yeah.
And we said, no, you might make a little bit more, but we're going to let you have part of the house and the truck and everything else. But you're going to stay at $250 a week for, you know, another 2 or 3 months, and then you'll be full in with everything. And again, just T had this great way of being outraged. Like we always make fun of him, the way he would get outraged over stuff. And I'll just never forget. Kind of like we always used to joke about how he was like so shocked at the little amount of money that we were making, you know, like how can you guys be stars and not make any money, you know? And then afterwards he got into it and we found out. So that was one thing. That probably wasn't that funny, except to us it was funny.
That is.
Well, it's like a Spinal Tap thing. To us, it's funny too.
Yeah,
right.
We get
it's
it.
Like,
my response was, that's why we keep Dale as a hired gun after 22 years.
Right. Yeah.
when
he
you
wants
said
to
that
actually
about
make money.
when you said you're full member, I was like, oh, you're screwed now because now you're sharing all the risks.
Exactly. You're sharing all the risk, meaning when we don't have money, you don't get money.
Yeah.
Right.
You know?
And when we owe money, you owe a quarter of that money.
Yeah, it was, you know, the thing with T was, I mean, he was such a great musician and he always played amazingly, you know, so there was never any kind of thing with that. But he also had his very interesting personality kind of quirks and you know, I'm trying to think of something that I can put on broadcast TV.
Right.
But he's, you know, he was a great guy. He just, you know, we know that he came to a sort of tragic end, and you know, that was the way that kind of played out. But he was very funny. You know, it's funny. Do you guys ever, if you've ever seen Curb Your Enthusiasm?
Sure.
Yeah. Have you ever seen that show? Anyone?
Not enough, but yeah, I know what you're.
Well, there's this comedian, Richard Lewis, who's on the show.
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
And he reminded me a lot of T the first time. Yeah.
Right.
He had the very same kind of dry delivery, really like, you know, a sense of kind of irony about things, a sense of outrage. So if you want to know what T was like, look at Richard Lewis.
He was always pulling his hair out a little bit, but it was entertaining to the onlooker.
Yeah.
They
what else? I didn't actually look at all these. There's a lot of commentary.
Sure, yeah.
I'll keep this really quick, but I was going to mention, I mentioned this last week too, but real quick, Steve mentioned to me one of his things about T was when they would ride together and T drove, T was taking photographs while he was driving, and Steve's a nervous passenger, you know, and so it would just drive him nuts. He'd just be like, ha, 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 the whole time, and T would be like,
I wasn't with them at that point, and so I can only imagine what that was like. I already told you that, hey, you know, Steve would allow me to drive. I'm shocked to hear that T could drive when Steve was in there.
Well, I think they were in a situation where it just had to be.
Yeah.
It was like a rental car with whose name was on the rental kind of thing or something like that. But
something about your story, Andy, reminded me of there was a show we did, and I don't even remember where it was, but you were nice enough to come check us out. And then afterwards, you know, just you always strike me like this, where you're just a fellow musician and you're curious about what you see going on. And we're breaking down at the end of the set, and you said, interesting that you're packing up your drums that way. And people will make conversation like this with me a lot, where they're like, hey, how come you don't leave your drums more set up so it's less trouble? They're looking at it as like a drummer to drummer thing, where they're like, you're making more work for yourself, making it and getting it into this container. And you mentioned something like interesting that you're breaking your drums down that way. And I said, well, and everything is interconnected with a band like us, where we're always driving. There's a vehicle. How big is the vehicle? Who has other stuff are we taking? Who can lift half of this thing? If I put all my hardware in a thing, pretty soon it takes two of me to do it, and we're going to herniate our discs. And so anyway, I remember just going, well, it's because the old van wasn't tall enough to stand this up in. And then once we got the new van, now it's just all interrelated to everybody's role. And more than anybody, I totally remember how you completely fucking got that. You were just like, oh yeah, totally. Like, this is a guy who has been in a band where everything affects everybody.
Listen, man, I have packed a lot of trailers and a lot of trucks.
Yep.
Yeah.
Right.
You
Yeah.
know?
Well, the fact that you were curious, the fact you even noticed how I was breaking down drum hardware was interesting. And then when I said, well, okay, look, and then, yeah, you just like, yep, totally. Yeah. If the van's only that tall, the van's only that tall.
Yeah,
Right.
that's funny. Yeah.
Chelsea chimed in and said, she said crazy because Steve would play guitar and drive at the same time. That's a good point, Chelsea.
Well, yeah, he would do that when he was alone, though. Like, he would do that
Right.
when Steve lived way out in the sticks, and to drive in to practice, he would have to, he'd have like a 45-minute drive or something. So
Let me check this with you, Andy. Glenn Hintzman asks or says, Frank Josephs played on some keys on The Great Spectacular. He has an original LP that he paid $50 for in 1976 or 77.
yeah.
So is that true?
So Frank is a real character too. I haven't seen him in forever, but my one story about Frank is, I have two stories. He was a student at University of Miami, and I was at his house one time. We were practicing or something like that, and I opened up his refrigerator. I asked him for something to drink or something, and I opened up his refrigerator, and all he had in his refrigerator was a half-eaten coconut that had fallen off a tree.
Wow.
And then the other thing, this is more appropriate, but the other time I saw Frank walking on the grounds of the University of Miami, and he was just walking, and I was kind of walking the other way, and he was carrying a hammer. I was like, "What are you doing?" He said, "I'm going to fix my piano."
Nice.
So Frank is on that album. Frank, that album. So here's a odd story. I had about 20 of those albums, and when the band broke up, the version 1 of the band that I was in, when we broke up and I moved to California, which was 84, early 84, I think. I had just gotten divorced, and I brought all my stuff with me, and I had over 1,000 albums, including, about 20 of those Great Spectacular albums. And I lugged them from place to place. Finally, they got in a warehouse somewhere, and, I just finally had it, right? And I said, okay, I'm going to go sell these albums. And I sold all of them except these 20 Great Spectaculars, and the guy wasn't going to give me anything for them, so I kept them. Eventually, I went to another record store in like Thousand Oaks or somewhere, and the guy was like, "Well, this is pre-internet days, right?" And so he was like, "Well, yeah, I guess I could give you like I don't know, $80 or something." And I was like, "Okay, I need the money."
Oh man.
And so now I guess it's a collector's item per the
Right.
statute that he bought it for.
Yeah, something tells me that if you had those and you were signing them personally and putting them up on an eBay site as Andy West right now, you'd probably make about at least $80 a record,
Yeah.
as opposed to $80 for all the records.
It doesn't matter, man. Everyone can hear this stuff, if you want to hear it. So
Yeah.
it's just a thing, right?
Mhm.
This is really interesting. These people, all this stuff. I'm just noticing.
Yeah.
Hey, can I check to see if this mic is working more properly?
Yes, it sounds great.
It does.
So,
Yes.
so we should, next time that we sound check, let's all sound check each other. That's kind of the
Totally
idea.
sound check next time. Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow.
John
Yeah.
has a question,
Okay.
and we call him Goober. He's a super fan, and he's one of those guys. The short story is he walked up and I said, "What's your name?" And he said, "I'm just some goober that likes the band." So it's stuck for decades now. But John says, Andy, what Dregs tune can you see TLB covering? Well, we've done one, and we did one with Andy.
True.
That's right.
True.
Well, you guys don't need to cover a Dregs song unless you want to just have fun with it. So, I wouldn't pick for you. You could.
Thank you.
You could do any of them.
Yeah.
That's the absolute right answer. I appreciate it. Then there's no pressure.
Well, this is how stupid I am. Every now and again. Well, right now I'm in a good place musically. I mean, I have people that I like to play with, and I do it on occasion. Very rarely. But in Phoenix, where I've lived for almost 25 years now, every now and again I would. Like someone would say, "Oh, this guitar player is great. You got to play with him." I'm like, well, I don't know any songs, I mean, unless we're going to play Led Zeppelin, Cream, or the Dregs, or we're just going to do a free jam.
Right.
Those are the things I know how to do. So I kind of got to the point where I was like, "Hey, yeah, well, if you really want to play, just learn a couple of Dregs songs. Tell me what you want to play." And half the time, people just would never call me back, and I couldn't figure it out. I literally didn't know how insane Steve's stuff was.
Yeah.
Wow.
It's
It's
ridiculous.
hard to play.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's ridiculous.
Because I've heard people play it, like like when you would play it, or
Keneally or Mike Keneally. He can.
Yeah, Keneally, right? Keneally. It's funny because Mike was telling me that they did a tour, Satriani and Morse Band, and he told me that there was a part in Night Meets Light, which is one of our early songs.
Yeah.
He said, I could never figure out what this part was. And Steve showed me how to do it. And I was thinking, that's bizarre, Mike. Mike is the kind of guy who can literally play anything.
Yes.
Yeah, right.
And he was like, I couldn't figure this part out.
Wow. Yeah.
What's so funny about Mike is, and he would, I would tell him this, I'll preface it by saying similar on a different level, but similar to Joe Walsh, where there's a level of, there's like this, for lack of a better term, a Joe Walsh slop, but it integrates itself into what he does. And he sounds super tight, and he always sounds, like in the pocket. But there's like this Joe Walsh slop. Keneally has the same thing, but it's this super crazy prog head guy, where there's like this part of one of the traits of his playing is the Keneally slop. But I don't mean that in a bad way, and he wouldn't take it that way. It's just the character of how he sounds. He'll play the craziest stuff ever and hit every note, but it's got this jagged kind of Keneally-esque angular thing.
Sounds like it's on the edge.
I know exactly what you're saying. I mean, it's weird to hear you say that, but it's a looseness kind of.
Yes.
I mean, he's so articulate and precise, but there's also this looseness.
Right.
Yeah. It comes across as spontaneous. It comes across as like on the edge.
Yeah. It's fun to play with him because as many chops as he has, I never feel like, because he has that, it feels fun, and I don't feel like I'm getting crushed. I don't feel intimidated. Like, you play with some guys and you feel a little bit like, oh man, what am I doing up here?
It's very comfortable to play with Mike. Wait a minute, is this Chelsea Slick, the awesome bass player?
No,
I think
Chelsea is
piano player.
And a singer.
Yes.
This is the Chelsea Slick.
She's Chelsea that lives in the Bay Area.
Okay.
And she actually is friends with everyone kind of in the whole Steve Morse bubble.
That's cool. That's neat though.
Penny Larson says Night Meets Light has been my favorite song since I discovered it when I was a teenager.
Yeah.
Penny
it's a beautiful song. It's amazing. I mean, some of the stuff that Steve wrote, I mean, he is still a fantastic, awesome composer. But it's like, Beethoven wrote a lot of great stuff even when he was, young.
Mm-hmm.
Right. Well, you've got so much fire when you're young, and you get tired when you get older,
Oh, Chelsea says she plays piano. Great. All right, cool.
Andy told me the other day that I should keep the beard, and I said, yeah, but it adds a few years. And he goes, I really like the beard. Yeah.
I think it's a good look.
Can you talk a little bit about the Dregs tour the couple years ago? And just, I mean, that was such a big deal for everybody, and we're so thankful that it happened. And how, I don't know, any stories from that or?
Yeah, well, that was incredible. It really was a wonderful thing because, well, it was strange. There's a lot of kind of bittersweet aspects to it, right? Because, since we had played all that music, we knew how it was supposed to be played.
Right.
And we couldn't really do it like that anymore. It just wasn't. So I'm not trying to diminish it. I mean, I'm just saying it was bittersweet because it was like, okay, what we're doing is really cool, and it's cool for us and it's cool for the people that are hearing it. Mm-hmm. But it's not the same. So it's like you kind of come to this point of realization in, where you are in life. Like, okay, this is the reality of this. And, you can't like focus on the weirdness of aging, which is a fact, because it's strange because as a musician, you always think, well, the good thing about music is you can play it forever. Well, yeah, you can, but differently.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
So there was that side of it, but the other side of it was just the energy that came from the people and from us, I mean, really for us to get there and to play that stuff. And again, this is everything we were doing was like so old school, I mean, it's like get on stage and play loud and, just kind of be there. It's not about entertainment. It's not really a show per se. It's us playing music and people watching us,
Yeah.
And, we just had a blast with it. And there was, the good thing is there wasn't, we had a monitor system that was the same every night. So that was really different for us because we had never had anything like that.
So great, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, you knew a guy, right?
Yeah, we knew a guy, right? And and it was, there's a whole story about Scoots doing that, and but we had this guy who basically loaned us the mixer, from God, now I'm drawing a blank on it.
I think it was the Behringer, wasn't it the XT32 or whatever?
The X32.
That's what it was. Yeah, exactly. And Lloyd, right? Lloyd.
I'm not sure about the board. I know where the PA came from.
Yeah. So Mark and the whole my rig, was like, and David Owski. I mean, Mark was incredible from EV, but this was so. That was a whole different experience to have consistent monitors. So that felt pretty good. Although, even as I say that, I realized that there were nights when they were different. We couldn't figure out why. It's like, what the heck is going on here?
Yeah.
So, but there's just a really gratifying kind of thing. I mean, I think it was gratifying for all of us to sort of understand a kind of a point in time and a place in that small strata of history, and we had a blast playing it, and it was really cool. And it was just you kind of had to let go at a certain point. I mean, we thought that we could sort of we practiced. I mean, I practiced that stuff a lot, before we got there, and I even went to South Carolina and worked with Alan, and North Carolina with David Owski. We tried to work on some of these things, and but we had some funny moments when we got together at Steve's place and we're playing. I forget which song it was. Oh, it might have been Twigs Approved. Yeah. So Twigs Approved, from my perspective as a bass player, it's pretty easy. It's, I'm thumping along with a groove and there's a little part, which is a little melody part, and, playing some chords, I'm just playing roots. It's no big deal. Well, it turns out that there's this one section that has like 20 different chords with precise voice leading in it for keyboards. It's like that's the keyboard part. And we came to that part in the section and Owski, we called him Owski, was just kind of looking around, and Steve's looking at him like, "Why aren't you playing the part?" And David Owski says, "There's a piano part there."
Oh my God.
And so then it was like, okay, here's the chords. Chord 1, chord.
Right.
Oh boy.
And they go they move really fast, dun, 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 dun. I mean, every is a different chord. Like, so there were some moments like that were kind of uncomfortable.
Right. Well, I gotta say, from the fans and everybody, even looking at the comments, it was such a big deal, and the shows were so great. I mean, I think I saw 4 or 5 of them, and like just every time I was bouncing off the walls and hanging out with Scoots and stuff. It was so great, and the fans were just going nuts. So.
That was really fun. It was really great seeing you there too. Yeah, I forgot you went to like
she came to like 5 or 6 shows, right?
Yeah, I was at a bunch of the New York ones and then Los Angeles.
Yeah,
and
those New York shows were. I mean, the town hall was just great. I thought.
Yeah,
it was really high energy, and New York crowds.
What was amazing about it was, as a Dregs fan, we all thought that there was no possibility that would ever happen. And then I get this email about the NAMM show, and Andy wants to play a Dregs tune at the end of our set. And I go, oh, wow. First of all, I'm peeing myself based on that alone. And then at the end of that set, he shows me this picture on his iPhone of the original Dregs. And I was just like, it was like, of course, that's how you could do it. Of course, because I was thinking, there's guys, T's gone and Alan doesn't play anymore, and there's just no way this will ever happen again. And then he shows me this picture, and I was like, oh, holy crap, and so to go from that to know how hard you worked for like a year, and everybody, especially, I mean, Alan wasn't playing. Like, he went from not playing to playing.
Well, that's true. And that kind of, that was pretty amazing. So the thing with Alan, this is incredible, actually. And you can find this on YouTube. Okay, without going into all the emotional detail around it, I'll say that I got a call from Mark O'Connor, and Mark and I are friends, and he was like, "Hey man, I'm going to be in Charleston. Can I sit in?" And I was like, "Oh, let me check."
Yeah. Oh boy.
And so I went to because in my mind it's all one thing, right?
Yeah.
But Alan wasn't there on that last album, and so I asked, and it was like, okay, well. Let me think about it. And the next day, let's do it. So I was like, okay, great. And so there was so Mark O'Connor got on stage and played with us on the Bash in Charleston. And there's a video of it. His wife took a video of it from the side of the stage. And I swear to God, Alan played so freaking unbelievably in that song. They were trading riffs back and forth. And it was just like, we were all kind of like, wow. It's like, wait a minute, that's Mark O'Connor.
Yeah.
Right.
You're going to trade licks with Mark O'Connor.
Right. Oh my gosh. That would have been a cool one to see.
And he did, and it was incredible. So I'm just saying that it's, and you were there, you got to play on stage with Steve. So that's pretty cool.
Well, and to for a full circle moment for me, that was one of those things where, so 2 years earlier, you and I had worked up Cruise Control to do at the NAMM show, and I was on top of that. And then I had absolutely no plans. Everybody was jokingly threatening me for like 6 months while you guys were on the road. Like, I would get little messages like, when we get to LA, maybe come out and do something. I'd be like, yeah, okay. But that ain't going to happen. And then I get there, and Steve goes, "Did you bring your guitar?"
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden I'm up there like frantically trying to, But talk about, again, it's old hat to you because you've played with the guy for decades and decades. But for me to get on stage and trade licks with Steve is ridiculous. That's one of those things
that was awesome, man. I love seeing you up there. You really looked like it meant something, and it was cool.
Yeah.
But I will say this is funny because you brought back this other memory, which was when we did Cruise Control at the NAMM show, and it was you and Keneally and Andy Timmons. And now that you mention it, I kind of remember feeling a sort of trepidation from you doing that and like wanting to do it like really perfectly. And, Mike is like, yeah,
right.
You do that part, I'll do this, whatever.
Yeah, right. And Mike is the guy, talk about guys that can internalize things quickly. That's why I was asking you those questions early on tonight, because we do these jams, and we've played with Mike a lot. Like, we've toured with him 2 or 3 times, and we've done a lot of these jams with him, and he'll be in the back putting his earbuds in with his guitar on. And it's like, this is the first time he's listened to this, right? You can tell. It's not like he's been working on it for a week and he's brushing up. He's like, okay, I better get on this. He puts his earbuds in, and you're just like, holy crap, this guy is like biggest cojones I've ever seen in my life. Yeah. And then he gets up there and go, okay, now who goes first?
Yeah, right.
Truly. Well, I had done this. I did one quote unquote solo album, which took me years to put it together, and I could never finish it. I could just never get it quite done. And so I called Mike and I said, look, if you come here for 5 days, can we finish this? And he said, yeah. So I sent him all the stuff. And of course, when he got to my house, it was the first time he heard any of it. And, but in 5 days, we did it all. And I'm really proud of that record and proud of what he did on it. And it's like, it's just amazing. So, yeah, he's one of those guys.
Yeah.
He's unbelievable. He's a guy that will, I don't want to put anything out there, but eventually he's a guy that would probably end up on a TLB record, There's certain guys, I get questioned a lot, and I've said this many times. People always ask about Steve. Could you get Steve to play on your record? And it's like, I could, and I kind of leave it at that. It's like, you know what I mean? Do I want to? I mean, I love Steve, but you understand what I'm saying. It's like,
yeah.
It's like if you've got, is Mark O'Connor going to have, Alan play on his record? It's right. like, well, yeah, I'd kind of like to get a guy that sounds so different that I'm not spending my whole life trying to emulate, It's
yeah, that's pretty funny. Well, yeah, that's cool, man.
I have a question for Andy. If you don't mind me interjecting here. I know you're really into listening to a lot of new music, and what is some new music you've discovered and are checking out these days? Anything you can share?
I knew you were going to ask that somehow, and I thought I should make a list because it's so random.
Yeah.
But, it's funny because there's 2 things. Okay, there's 2 dimensions. One is the dimension of incredible musicianship that you can find on YouTube, right? And it's like, okay, if we kind of went off and started doing a search, it would start with, recently I saw, who's that guy, Henrik from Dirty Loops?
Yes.
Yep.
He did some song. Somebody sent me a video of him doing a song, which is, it's like a really super fast bluegrass beat, and he's got this, and it's called Chicken Lovers, and it's got this kind of crazy thing going on the bass. It's just like blows your mind. So I hear that, and I so much appreciate it, and I'll go back and listen to that a lot over time. But I'll listen to it from a perspective of kind of just appreciation, which is different than an emotional engagement to something.
Right, sure.
So there's a stream of appreciation which goes to all of the hundreds of bass players from Italy and Poland and the US and all over the world that you find on YouTube that are doing amazing things, right?
Yeah.
But then there's this other side, which is kind of like, I really like things like, I listen a lot to this guy Steve Roach, who does an album a week practically.
Wow.
Like albums. It's synthesizer. It's very almost ambient kind of stuff.
Okay.
So not a lot of melody and rhythm, but some of his stuff has, sequences that are very rhythmic. It's very, they kind of ties back to Tangerine Dream. I love that stuff. I mean, it makes me feel good to listen to it.
Yeah.
I also go to, for some reason I've been like listening to piano players, and there's this bass player named Avishai Cohen, who's an upright bass player from Israel, who I discovered, I mean, he's been around a long time, but I only discovered listening to him maybe 8 or 9 years ago. But he has a piano player, or had a piano player, this guy named Shai Maestro. And it's just like really great piano stuff.
Okay, cool.
Like trio stuff. And not very, not like super jazzy or outside or either super inside. It's just really wonderful music, and I appreciate it and love it and feel something from it.
Cool.
So that, and people like Bruce Hornsby, who's been around forever, but he's just a monster player in every dimension.
Yep.
But he also is a great singer and writes really cool words.
Yeah, yeah.
And there's, let's see, what else? What have I gotten recently? It's more of a genre. Recently, I sat down and I listened to, I don't know where this came from, but I decided I would listen to a Rachmaninoff piano concerto.
Nice.
And I listened to the whole freaking thing. I mean, I sat down and listened, like old school style listening on a couch with the speakers there.
Right.
Listening in the air with no computer and no phone.
Nice.
And an attention span.
And I was just like, oh my God, this is just, first off, it takes a lot of focus to do that.
Yeah. Right.
Because if you don't focus on the music in a particular way, it's going to start to sound noisy, or kind of distracting or something, but really focusing on it. I mean, I just got a lot out of it. I was just like, to imagine people at that time, playing that and listening to that. I mean, God,
everybody in the orchestra playing it, and no clams,
Yeah, it's staggering the level of dedication to get to that point. But the music is also really freaking cool,
right?
And Rachmaninoff has all these really intense parts, but yet there's these melodies weaving through that are really cool.
Yeah.
So I don't know. That's where I'm at.
Something that people may not know about you, but just being a friend of yours, when you're not playing music and you're listening, you listen better than any musician I know. I mean, I know a lot of musicians that don't even like to listen to music because that's what they do all the time, and you are like the most intense listener I've ever seen. When you're checking something out, you really check it out.
Yeah, it's probably because I'm not working on stuff all the time. I'm not actually playing all the time.
Is it?
I'm just kidding.
Is there as I get older, the more I can connect with what I'm playing emotionally while I'm playing it. But definitely, as you're coming up, it's more execution, and we always say it's about them, it's not about us. But do you find that you are able to emotionally connect to music that you're physically playing in the moment? The more you get.
Okay, so there's a lot of vectors here, right? There's being a musician, there's making a living, there's being an entertainer, right? And there's being a listener. So all of these things come into play. I have to say, I'm not that much interested in entertainment. Somebody who looks cool, or, there's a lot of people that are, and again, the level of musicianship is very high, but you can tell, okay, they're creating a persona. Here's the persona I'm going to sell. It's me who looks like this and acts like this, and I convey my attitude. Right. I'm just not interested in that. I'd rather just not even see somebody, I'd rather just hear it. Yeah. But having said that, I understand it completely. There's this bass player guy who I saw, another YouTube guy named Charles Bertude or something. Have you ever heard of him?
No.
Yeah. He's like a Berkeley guy. I guess he graduated like 4 or 5 years ago. But I watched him do this thing. He actually was playing Beethoven on the bass.
Oh, nice.
But the thing is, it was really entertaining, and he was really good, and his persona was interesting. So as I watched this thing and I interacted with it in my own head, I'm thinking, okay, this is entertaining. I like this guy. He's a good player. This is new to me. This is like watching a TV show.
Mm-hmm.
It's different. I mean, I'm getting something from it, right?
Mm-hmm.
I'm enjoying it, but it's not what I think of as a musical experience, like sitting in front of the speakers with my eyes closed.
Right. Yeah. Right.
So that made me realize that I was just old.
No. It's true, though. I mean, nowadays there's so much emphasis placed on the visual aspect of musicians, or I guess artists in general, and people listen with their eyes so many times. And we've experienced that just with gear. I will roll in my huge rig and the club freaks out. I'm like, no, I'm not going to be loud. It's just, and they just see that and they hear it as so loud. And the same goes for the way a person looks or the way they move or whatever. And I have seen you at shows just standing there with your eyes closed. And I'm like, yes, I appreciate that very much.
Yeah, I mean, I'd rather just be off on the side. I mean, the Robert Fripp thing or something. What are you looking at? Let me give you some lights or a movie or something if you got to watch something,
Yeah.
But I, so there's a part of me which totally understands it. I mean, I get people are just, that's how people respond. But for me, you asked about emotional connection. I mean, I can, watching a movie, I can get emotional. I mean, I can get emotionally into a movie. I can also get emotionally into reading a book, but they require different kinds of energy and engagement,
Yeah.
It's a freaking commitment to read a book.
Right. Right.
To sit in front and watch a movie for 2 hours is not that much.
Yeah.
Right. Well, being a Dregs disciple and, and a Rush disciple, I got to say that I grew up, being as engaged by the chemistry as I am, obviously the music is one thing, but if you're going to go see a band live, I do want to connect, and I want to connect as a musician playing live. And part of that for me is connecting with these guys on stage, connecting with the audience. And it is the chemistry of all those little looks when somebody got something right or got something wrong, or all the roadblocks and all that. That's, to me, that's the fun of that part of it,
Well, I agree. So the example I often use is I saw the Steve Gadd band a couple of years ago at the MIM. And, this is Steve Gadd and Jimmy Johnson on bass and Michael Landau on guitar and some other guy on keyboards. I'm embarrassed to say I don't know his name. They're all like incredible musicians. But the thing that happened was when they played together, there was such an exuberance to it. And they weren't like performing, like doing dances and shit or glaring at the audience. They were just playing music that they loved together with joy and exuberance.
Right.
Yeah.
Yes.
And it was like so special and so cool.
Oh, yeah.
I let go of a question earlier, and this is reminding me back of it. So when you were talking about the Dregs tour, I was thinking about, I had a brief experience where I played with a regional West Coast band, and then I was I toured with that band for 4 or 5 years in my 20s. And so you have all those experiences. You love those people, you hate them half the time, but you just have those intense relationships and you have a dynamic. And I stepped away from the band, and then a few years later we got together and did sort of I don't know if you call it a reunion, but I had a chance to play with all these ex-members in one place. It was a bit of a reunion show. And I was looking at it like, oh, this will be cool because I like that music, but I felt like I'd be separated from the baggage that I used to have. And then I got on stage. There's a long question, but I'll sum it up. I got on stage and it was weird. I felt like we snapped right back into our old roles and dynamics. Not all good. You know, some of it, like I hit a kick drum, and before the beat 2, the singer's looking at me like, you're Russian. And I'm like, you don't know. And the bass player's looking at me like, and it was weird. And I couldn't believe how fast we snapped back into 5-year-old dynamics. And, you know, there's love too. But it was weird. And I was just curious, and I'm not asking for you to, you know, any inside info, but did you find that when you were touring with the Dregs, it was a new, we're different people feeling, or did you sort of just go back into those personal dynamics?
Well, I would say that those things are like triggers that don't go away, but they're much softened with experience and time.
True.
Yeah.
So, is the violin a little bit out of tune? Yeah. Is Steve going to glare at Alan because it's out of tune? No.
Oh, yeah.
You know?
Good.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Which is different, right? So we let go of a lot of stuff, and we actually had a conversation about this. It was like something Steve's made. He made some football analogy or something like, well, you know, when the guy throws an interception, the next play he has to go throw another pass. You know, it just is what it is. You know, and you don't get all bent out of shape over it. You know, and so I think that's the difference between your 30s and your 60s, right? You learn to let go of stuff. You can focus on the stuff that you can change. Hey, did you know, like, are you hearing this the same as I am? You know, that's different. Is that note the same one I'm playing, right? That's different than saying, fuck.
What's wrong with you?
Yeah. Can't you get it right?
What's so great about that is when I played with you guys, I had never seen, you know, I'd been around the later incarnation of the Dregs a lot over the years. I'd never been around the original incarnation of the Dregs. And that one, I could feel exactly what you're talking about. And I'd never felt that before. And I was kind of freaked out. I said to Jen, I said, it's the first time I've ever seen these guys like a band, like there was some band dynamic going on. And I don't mean that in a good way or bad way, but let's say a challenging way, where I know what that is. I've been in the same band for 20 whatever years, and I saw you guys have that, and it was so fun for me to go, wow, they're real guys, and they're kind of, you know, it was like at sound check, there was a little bit of, you know, there's a little bit of like just kind of subtle side eye and like, what's going on over there?
You know, it's funny. There was one thing that stuck in my head. You know, there was a lot of conversation, but in the middle of the Odyssey, something happened, and I kind of lost where I was. But I just kept playing, you know, it's like, cause it's, you know, it's that beginning of the song where it's just, so it's kind of like, okay, it sort of doesn't matter what I play, but I really don't like the fact that I'm lost and I don't know what I'm doing. And I mentioned something to Steve about it. I said, yeah, I couldn't believe it. I got to that spot and I just forgot what was next or where I was. And he says, yeah, I know I was there.
That sounds like something Travis would say. Exactly. Verbatim.
Yeah. I was like, yeah, I know you were. Jesus.
I'll say this about, you know, like with our relationship is, you know, Jen is so used to me being kind of hard-nosed in the early days, and I haven't been like that in a long time. I really haven't, but I'll look at her on stage and she thinks I'm looking at her. She's still defensive. Even now, is that
what it is? Yeah, okay.
Even though now it's like lighthearted, I'll look over there and, you know, it'll either be going great. And even if I look at her because it's going great, she thinks, what's going on? What happened? You know? And she'll be like, don't look at me when I screw up. I'm like, did you screw up? I didn't even know. I was like, but those things never leave after a certain point, right? It's like,
yeah.
You know,
no, there's definitely, you know, I mean, you clearly traveling together like that. I mean, you get to know way too much about people, and you know everything in a sense. And so, if there's anything that's annoying or repeatedly funny, it's gonna be that way.
right.
You know? It's hilarious.
Well, you know, and the other thing and I mentioned this to you that night and many times since, but the interesting thing about that was I had only heard those records. I'd never heard that band. I've heard the quote unquote Dregs many times, but not that Dregs, right?
Yeah.
And I was so taken aback by how it sounded like the Dregs on the records, like I was like, oh wow, that sounds like the record, and not in it, nothing positive or negative about it, just very interesting to me how much those guys sounded like those records.
Yeah, it's strange, isn't it? Because it's like, I thought about this when we were doing this. I was like, well, okay, this is kind of weird because, we could go down to Berkeley and find 5 people that could play this music perfectly, and they would. But we have to believe that there's something else.
Right.
Yes.
Right. Yes.
Yeah.
Right.
There definitely is. That was just some of the most magical shows I've ever been to. And yeah, I've seen lots of other Dregs shows too. And yeah, definitely there's something else,
Nice.
than just playing the stuff perfectly.
Do a couple of quick questions and then we'll start to wrap this up before you run out of light. But John Goober asked, and I know this is one of those things that he might have been waiting 10 years or 20 years to ask, so I'm going to ask it. He says, Andy, I saw you and Joaquin Liviano, is that how you pronounce that? At Oakland in the early 80s at some random warehouse, not even a venue, one of my greatest live shows ever. Any Joaquin stories? I don't even know what he's talking about. So
that's awesome. Well, Joaquin is a really fantastic guitar player. He played on 2 of the early Jean-Luc Ponty albums. And I forget which ones, but it was like, around the same time as when we were out. So, and then Joaquin and I were in a band together for many years. And what he's talking about is sounds like the Keystone in Oakland. And Joaquin and I did a show. And Joaquin, when I met him when he was in Ponty when I was still in the Dregs. But then when I moved to the Bay Area, we reconnected and we started playing together. But he had a band with him and Narada Michael Walden. Do you know who he is, the drummer?
Yes.
Yeah. And
Jeff Beck's drummer sometimes.
Yeah, he's amazing. And this guy, oh man, Keith Jones was playing bass, who he plays with Ponty now. And Frank, I'm losing my focus on Frank. Frank was a keyboard player who actually ended up writing a bunch of songs and producing Mariah Carey.
Oh, wow.
And so we had a band for a little while with Frank. Mike Walden wasn't in it, but this other drummer was, and me and Joaquin. And I think that was where it was at the Keystone, Palo Alto. And
John says Joaquin is watching now, by the way.
Really?
That's what he says.
Hi, Joaquin. And Chelsea says Keystone was in Berkeley. Does that sound familiar as opposed to Palo Alto?
Yeah, maybe.
Yeah. It's kind of the same.
Funny. Well, if he's on here, I hope to be doing some music again with him sometime because he's fantastic.
Oh, cool.
So
that's great.
Well,
what was the name of the project with him?
Well, we had back then. I have no idea what we called it.
Okay.
We did an album called FWAP, FWAP.
Oh yeah.
Which is pretty cool, and that's out there somewhere. And we had a band called Zazen, which was electronic music. Another keyboard player who has left us. I mean, it seems like it's just, I guess it gets common as you get older, statistically speaking, that there's going to be musicians that go away.
Yeah.
But, it is what happens. But yeah, so that's that.
Cool.
Is that a train?
Yeah, it's a train.
Nice.
Another question.
I was going to mention one more little quick story, and then we should wrap it. This happened the day before I moved to Augusta, Georgia, which is where I met Steve. So I was in the 11th grade, and Steve was in the 10th grade. And before I moved to Augusta, a friend of mine in high school said he had a band that played in Augusta. They played like a little outdoor festival or something. And I said, well, I'm moving there. What's it like? And he said, oh, it's just a bunch of short-haired soldiers, because there's a fort there, Fort Gordon, and a couple of hippies. But there's a kid there who plays just like Jimmy Page, named Steve Morse.
Wow.
And I said, oh, okay, well, I'll look for him. And the day before I moved to Augusta, this is where it all ties in a weird way. So, you know, Peter Green was a guitar player, passed away, right?
He passed today. Yeah.
And yeah, and you know, I'm thinking, oh, he was really old. No, he was 73, so he's 6 years older than me. But literally the day before I moved to Augusta, I saw Fleetwood Mac, that version of Fleetwood Mac with Peter Green and Danny Kirwan, the Oh Well version, right?
Wow.
They played in the Atlanta Sports Arena. And I remember just like, okay, this is freaking incredible. You know, this is it. This is life. But the next day I get in a car and I drive to Augusta. And I drive into Augusta, and it's like one street, you know, and it looks just like you would imagine the South. Instead of the 70s, it looked like the 50s, you know?
Right. Yeah.
And it was just like a real culture shock for me. And the first day I went into school, met the principal, and he said, well, of course, you got to get a haircut. And I was like, what? And he says, yeah, your hair is at least 2 inches too long right now, you know. And turns out that when I walked into school, I actually had the longest hair in school.
Wow.
Right down to here, you know. And but I needed a haircut because they had rules. And about in the first week I was there is when I met Steve. He was in the French class that I was in.
Wow.
Huh.
And I just remember the teacher assigning something and this guy behind me saying, oh, that's not where it's at. You know, instead of like some hick, there was a guy speaking, you know, something else. And we just struck up a conversation, and then that was the beginning of that whole thing.
Wow.
Nice.
So that was very similar. Jen and I met in school as well. So in a class.
Photography class. Yep.
That's right. You told me that.
She was talking about how she'd blown up her amplifier or something like that. It's
and you were like, what?
Yes. And it's actually still blown up, and it's still up in the attic.
Yeah, right. I know. But that was the same time. We were both juniors. I mean, we were, sophomore, junior age. So, 11th grade, I guess. Yeah.
That's amazing. Maybe. Well, and I mean, you know, kudos and congratulations.
Well, Andy, thank you. Thank you for not only for just an entire life of inspiration and, you know, why we would be sitting here with you in the first place, but thank you so much for always just being warm and a generous friend. And, you know, we get into late night conversations sometimes, and I love it. And I feel privileged to know you. So thanks so much for joining us tonight and sharing with everybody else our little hang here.
Yeah. Thank you.
I appreciate the invite, and I love all you guys, and thank you very much. And we'll see you sometime.
And if there's anything you want to promote or talk about before we go that people could check out.
Well, you know, I've got a couple things. So if you go to my website, andywest.com, or on Facebook, I guess the only time I get on Facebook is when I'm doing something. So, you know, you can look there, but, you know, just seek it out. There's nothing to promote really.
Yeah.
And
as soon as this I was going to say, as soon as this whole, you know, state of the world is moving along, let's get together and like hang out, you know?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yep.
Yeah. I'll be coming by your neighborhood for sure.
Cool.
Yeah. And
all right, see you guys later then.
Thank you, Andy. And
Thanks,
everybody
Andy.
checking out the feed every Saturdays at 7, and all our support Travis Larson Band links are in the description of this particular show right here, as well as all the others. So check it out. And thanks again, Andy. Love you, man. See you soon.
Thank you guys, and thank you.
Bye.
Bye.